Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Strive Summit podcast. I'm your host, Alex Hanna, and today with me I have James Hillegas. And I may be pronouncing your last name right. Is that correct, James?
Oh, that's perfect. That is spot
Awesome.
on.
Perfect. James, why don't you go and introduce yourself, kind of talk a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's James Hillegas. I work for a commercial framing and drywall contractor in Atlanta, Georgia. We mainly work in Atlanta, Georgia. If it's a prefab job, we'll kind of go to the other states. Um, in the company's past life, they've gone all over the Southeast, but I would say predominantly within the last, at least since I've been here, it's primarily serving the Metro Atlanta market. Here I kind of oversee our 3D modeling and our prefabrication operations for the most part.
So you're kind of like the 3D modeler, manager, coordinator, director, guru.
Yeah, I was the youngest person here for a long time. They hired a new gal on the accounting side. She's now the youngest, so still am the token IT person, being the youngest. So anytime it's like I can't get the TV to work, or how do you connect
that's
Teams to the TV? Yeah, I get called in. It's not that I'm good with technology. I'm just
that's
willing to
usually
sit
how
there
that
and
works. We all grew up with computers.
exactly. That's why I tell people like, look, you're not going to break it. Just keep pushing buttons, unplug it, replug it in, switch the cords. It'll eventually work. So
That's usually what I have to do. I was like, hey, have you tried turning it on and off again? Perfect. I'm going to go back to work.
yeah. Exactly. And it feel like how's it? I don't
So,
ask me.
so James, do you get any on-site kind of do you get to go on-site at all? See any of the work that you finished completed?
Yeah, we do. I go to work. I go to on site probably I'd say once or twice a week, depending on what's going on and how many jobs we have. Like for example, this week I think I was on different job sites 3 days of the 5 of the week. So like today I was on 2 job sites, one downtown and one kind of in the suburbs. Yeah, I do go on site. Not as often as a PM potentially, but I would say 14, maybe 13 or 14 days out of the month probably spend on site.
That's fun. So I'm assuming you get to kind of be like the field BIM guy. People got questions for the drawings, you kind of show them on a tablet or something like that.
Yeah, I'll go to site to answer questions. I'll talk with the GC about prefab or kind of schedule, like logistically speaking, like when they want trucks, when they don't want trucks, how we're getting them in, all that kind of stuff. I'll um, I'll talk to the foreman. Sometimes I'll just stand off to the side and observe. Like I won't say I'm coming. I'll just kind of watch and see, what things are working or not working. Just kind of observe. And if I announce I'm there, then people kind of know and will look for you or potentially behave differently. So sometimes I'll just kind of show up and stand way off in the distance just to kind of watch and learn. Not well, one was to learn, and two is to see what we can do better. But like for example, this week was helping the guys with layout. I'm teaching some of the newer guys how to use one of the total stations. It's not a total station. It's Spectra's like laser system. I mean, the two lasers they cross, layout. Um,
Okay.
so this week didn't go too hot. Lithium batteries don't work that well in the cold, so that tablet lasted for about a solid hour. So that didn't go very well this week.
Let's talk tech for a minute. So it seems like you got your hands on a lot of tech, from laser scanners to prisms, point layout, your 3D model in the field. So kind of tell me about some cool stuff you've been using lately, or maybe you've seen software that you've been using. Let's get into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, one of the favorite tools has been Procore's 3D model tool. So we have Procore as the project management tool that everybody uses, and we've had it now for
Mm-hmm.
2 years probably. The model tool, and that's been great. It's super easy to use. The field absolutely loves it. Like I didn't really have to teach anybody, how to use it outside of what the kind of the joysticks meant. Um, Within the last 6 months, I don't think I've really picked up anything new per se. I've watched a lot of tools and I'll kind of observe what's going on with AI and all the different things that come out. But a lot of the stuff I'm more not necessarily innovation department type of person. So a lot of the things that I use need to be for operations. So I mean, I'll play with stuff on the side potentially, but as far as implementing day to day, like it's kind of got to be vetted out just because.
Hmm.
Everything is a real job with real dollars and a real schedule. So I'm not necessarily going to gamble a whole lot on something
Right.
completely new. But AI has been fascinating. There's obviously a lot of tools that come out. Um, so I would say Procore Models has been super, super useful.
What have you used AI for lately?
We messed around with it once for some renderings, just to see like what it could do. We haven't used it for anything
Hmm.
else. I use ChatGPT for one small data analysis thing, um, looking at product counts. Um, Outside of that, nothing super crazy that other people probably haven't seen or experienced.
Awesome. Yeah, so some of our listeners out there may not know what any of this stuff means, and I think a lot of what we use today in tech, from laser scanners to even point layout systems, Procore 3D, I think we take for granted because it's something we use every day. But like what we really do every day is some really cool shit, right? So like we play Sims for adults down to a minute level. At the end of the day, we're playing games all day, and we get to play with way awesome tech. So if anyone out there is interested in any of that stuff, let me know. Obviously, James play. I won't say you play with it, but you use it almost on a monthly basis, especially with like point layout. Can you kind of go into what a prism is and what a point layout is, or how that works on site, and what that means for the tech that you use?
Yeah, so we produce a 3D model in Revit, which is the main modeling tool that we use. Um, so like to kind of get into the
Mm-hmm.
very specific weeds, we're on the framing and drywall side. So when you have a wall, walls have multiple layers. There's the framing layer, which is like the structure of the wall. Then you have your outer layers, which might be some furring or RC channel, resilient channel for sound. Then you might have one or two or three layers of drywall, depending on what the wall type is from the architect, and that's primarily dictated based on a sound rating. So STC, like sound transmission controller, whatever that's, I don't even know what it stands for. I just know it means how the sound's rated, and then fire. So that kind of dictates the design of that wall. And so inside of Revit, we detail everything correctly, the correct size width, no nominal dimensions, with the correct layers. And then from there, we use Autodesk Point Layout to go through the model and place all the layout points, which is going to be the framing layer, not the drywall layer, not the furring layer, because you don't want the guys to have to do math. So when I first started, you would always think, oh, let's place the outside edges of the wall. But that's not what gets installed first. What gets installed first is that framing or that structural layer of the wall. And so that's what they want to have the dimensions to, because if you provide them the outermost dimensions being what we would call finish, then somebody's got to do the math backwards to work into what that, core of the wall is going to be, because that's what goes first. You're going in to out, not out to in. So we go through Autodesk layout. You set all your points at the corners. You'll set your control points, which is usually a conversation with one, the foreman or whoever's doing layout in the field, and then the general contractor for what do we have as control? Like what grid lines have you placed down? Are you using centerline of corridor? So that way you can set up your control points in the field. And then from there you export a CAD file out to a tablet and a CSV file of all the points. And the CSV file is basically, four columns. There's point number, an X coordinate, a Y coordinate. In our case, there's a Z, but it doesn't matter for us because everything's usually on the floor. Um, and so from there, when you get to the field, you set up your total station. The control points that we referenced prior are what ties your digital world to the real world. And that's kind of like a GPS, when it's calibrating your car, it's trying to figure out, where you are in the world to give you the correct directions to wherever you're trying to go, which is what control points do for the model. It tells, your little drawing where you are in the real world, so it correctly lays out the points. So once you establish control in the field, you then, usually we'll go through and we'll back check. So we'll basically use the total station to set out a few points automatically, but then we'll also pull a tape measure out to check and just confirm that everything's correctly calibrated. And it can even be as simple as, some tools will shoot a point and it'll tell you, the tablet will say like, we think this is 23 feet, 6 3/4 inches from this point to that point. And then you go and pull a tape measure to kind of verify that, yes, it's correct or not correct. And that basically confirms that you've correctly set everything up. And then from there, the guys can go through the field and they got the tablet and they can select the layout points that they want, which again are the edges or corners of the wall or center line of openings, and they can mark points on the floor. We still have to snap chalk lines. We're not using anything like the fully automated systems that exist, like Rugged Robotics or Dusty. We've looked at them before, but we haven't implemented them yet, and so we're just still using a system like that for the present moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, so Dusty Robotics is a basically an inkjet tool that will run around your entire construction call it zone on floors, and then we'll do full wall layout if you want to do mechanical layout, penetrations and stuff. Really cool. Definitely check them out on LinkedIn or even at Dusty, their website as well. All right, James, I want to get into the nitty gritty. I want to know what led you down this path, and how did you get to be the youngest guy where you're at, in charge of all the BIM and then IT, and also get out on the field and see all that stuff finished. I want to know where you started. How'd you find your way there?
So the way I found my way there is one, I have Asperger's, so naturally 3D visualization is something that I'm just gifted with from God. And so like
Mm-hmm.
that's just something that was just a gift. And so in high school, we had a program called Pathway to Engineering. And it basically, is different disciplines of engineering. You're each, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year of high school. And so we had, one year was electrical engineering, one year was mechanical. And in the year we took mechanical engineering, we learned a tool called Autodesk Inventor, which is not so much used in the construction industry. It's more of like a mechanical engineering type of tool, just because of the level of detail. It's usually for like casting and molding
Mm-hmm.
and things of that nature. Um, and so that's where I first got exposed to 3D modeling, was Autodesk Inventor. And the projects weren't construction related in any capacity. They were simply like, here's how to use a tool, like here's how to do a loft, and here's how to do a sweep, and here's how to do a void, and different extrusion, etc. How to do offsets, different simple commands of the software itself. Like as simple analogies like in Microsoft Word, like here's how you bold characters, here's how you italicize, here's how you underline, etc. But the projects were, the teacher would go to the Dollar General. He bought random stuff like toys, and he would basically give you a dial caliper and the toy, and you had to take the toy apart, reverse engineer it, 3D model the toy inside of Inventor, and then put it back together inside of Inventor. So like I remember one of the toys was it was a handheld device. It had a trigger in your hand, and there was a basket and a ball. So like you pull the trigger, a little spring pops, the ball flies in the air. Your goal is to catch it. So you took it apart. There was plastic
Mm-hmm.
molds for the casing. There was a spring. There was a trigger, and there was a basket. And you had to 3D model the entire thing. So that's where I first got exposed to 3D modeling. Um, went to school for engineering, so that was pretty straightforward. And I don't know exactly where I picked it up, but I had the 3D modeling experience. But I at some point made my skills with computers and 3D modeling to advance my career. Like I wasn't going to have 20 years experience. I wasn't going to know everything there is to know. But I knew how to use a computer. And I knew I could 3D model, and I just needed to learn how to understand what I was 3D modeling. And so the analogy I often use
Mm-hmm.
is anybody can buy Microsoft Word, but not everybody's writing Harry Potter novels. Same thing with any 3D modeling tool. Anybody can buy one, but you have to understand what you're actually modeling, and can you fabricate it, and can you build it, and does this make sense, and what details are missing. And that's what I was greatly lacking. And I had to spend time in the field, a lot of time in the field, like a lot. I worked every weekend. I have many horror stories of not know. It's like getting blindside hit. Like I didn't even know what to look out for, because I didn't even know you're supposed to look out for that type of detail. Um, And so the
Mm-hmm.
way I
Mm-hmm.
specifically ended up in framing was working as like a PE superintendent on a large hospital. It was like a $170 million hospital. I was put in charge of the exterior envelope and structural steel, like the two scopes that I was responsible for. So the exterior envelope had
Yeah.
terracotta panels, metal panels, and masonry, like full set brick. And to make a long story short, there's complicated details between deflection joints and reveals and whatnot. And nobody made a coordinated set of shop drawings. And because I knew how to use the 3D model, I took the architect's model, the structural engineer's model, CAD files from the different vendors, and made this coordinated shop drawing set just because I knew how to use the tools. And that's kind of what led me into the framing industry, through that path. I ended up working for that subcontractor um, in their prefab shop. And that's what really taught, like, I really gained the expert, not, I wouldn't call myself an expert in framing, but I was worked with a guy who was a 25-year union carpenter. And that's kind of where I learned framing to a much greater extent than what I had before.
That's awesome. I love your story about the Dollar General toys. Like I can imagine going through something like that. That actually sounds like actually a really fun practical to kind of go do. And like honestly, I'm about to go find a toy in one of my things and take it apart and kind of play around with it in Fusion. Um, or even like I took when I train and educate on Revit, what I tell people is take something that is they can measure to build their MEP systems in, because I train on MEP systems and modeling, right? So I say build your house. Your house, rather than building a box and trying to come up with a form, give yourself a form to then model around. So that's a great practice as well. Obviously, an inventor, that's a different kind of thing. I actually went to school to go do mechanical modeling. So, like airplane parts, I was in pinball parts for a little bit. And I absolutely loved it. The manufacturing side, I was SolidWorks, man. I was a wizard and cocky, but I was a wizard. And so I was doing that, 3D printing targets and stuff. And then I kind of fell into the modular construction. So I avoided construction like the plague, didn't want to do fractions, ended up in modular, and it was like the perfect mixture of both worlds, right? I had the manufacturing process with the construction background, and then now I'm learning framing, I'm learning MEP. So it was a huge exposure, and I absolutely loved it. I would not have traded for a world. And if anyone can, if their first CAD or Revit or any kind of drafting job is in a modular factory, 1000% recommend, because there's some experience there. You get exposed to a lot of different things. But I mean, James, I see you post all the time on LinkedIn. So there's got to be a portion of your day that you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this all the time. So tell me what excites you most about getting in Revit and doing these panels, and kind of keeps you going day to day.
One thing I think I love building stuff. Like I genuinely love to build. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was the kid that watched. We grew up behind a farm growing up. It's now a high school, but it was a farm. And I would just watch tractors bale hay. Mom would pull over, and I would just watch. And we did it for construction sites. She would pull over. There was just something that I found fascinating about the big machines. That's really what it was. And the what keeps me going is I know there's a lot more that we can do. Like I just now that I've been in the industry for I guess 5 years now, I guess something like that. Um, I know, like, I feel like I have enough of a grasp finally on how to build that I know, and I know enough with the computer now that I know there's so much more that we can do. And that's what I'm most interested in and what keeps me going. And every project's like a new chance to, like, okay, I messed this up last time. Like, can I not mess this up again? Like, this can't happen again. Like, for example, last year we had a job. I shipped the buck hoist panels. That's my fault. That's my responsibility. So, this was a high rise job downtown Atlanta. So a buck hoist, for those that don't know, it's like basically a material elevator. Like it's a temporary elevator. It's on the outside of a building. There's different names for them. Some
Mm-hmm.
people call them a skip hoist, but it's basically a temporary elevator used in construction. And so it runs from whatever the ground to whatever floor they have. It's tied off at certain points. And when these are running, you have to leave out the permanent exterior wall because you need to leave a hole essentially in the building to get material in and out of. And so we're not supposed to ship those panels because you can't install them and then they just get put in the way of something else and they are going to get damaged and they're probably going to get lost just because they're in the way and people are, move them. The GC says, get this out of here. And so that job, we
Right.
shipped them. Shouldn't have happened. And so now on jobs, I make sure to go through and label where the buck hoist is and make sure that that never happens again. So it's just stuff like that. That's, can I not mess this up again?
Yeah, I can tell you, back in modular, that was definitely one way to learn was finding out you put the wrong wall in the wrong package, and then it's built and it's on. The mod has already gone through all 36 stations. It's outside now, and you got to tell the guy, hey, by the way, you built that thing. I need you to fix it. And then so you definitely have that confrontation at least once, if and hopefully not twice. But it's definitely a quick reminder that there's a lot of responsibility on the drafter's side, the modeler's side, to make sure the production is correct. Um, a lot of that has to do with communication, right? Communication with the guys in the field and how they want to see drawings is probably the number one thing that I think gets overlooked so much, right? Even in some coordination meetings, you have the engineers, you have the models and coordinators, but do you have the guys in the field? And do you have your drawings going to those guys in the field to double check everything's correct, right? That's got to be the most important. I remember going through when I first started, kind of looking through some stuff and then going out and saying, hey, what do you guys use on these sheets? And some of them had, yeah, we use some of these. And some were like, yeah, we don't use your sheets. And so then you send it out without a package next time, and then we're like, what the hell are we doing making these sheets that you don't use? So it has to do with a lot of communication, making sure that's correct. So James, is it safe to assume that when you get home you also have a little project you're doing in Revit on your own?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely have stuff that I'm working on outside of the day-to-day operations for sure. There's definitely projects.
So I gotta ask, what do you have going on?
Um, so how do I explain this? The Probably one of the biggest things is trying to automate certain parts of, what I do, and the other part is I would say is more of making rule sets just so I don't make mistakes again, and so the other guys that are modeling on the team know what to look out for, like what mistakes I've made. And so some of it's like the cool automation pieces, but some of it, and I think the more important pieces are like the rule sets of like this is how sheets need to look. This is how we want things dimensioned. We use this color to mean this. We use this color to mean that. Because at the end of the day, automation's cool. I'm still a nerd. Like I'll play with technology, but it's got to make business sense as well. Like it's got to have an effect on the bottom line. Otherwise, we're not a company anymore. You know, so I would say that's what I spend most of the time on outside of after hours now is more of because I'm no longer the only modeler here.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to teach other people how to do it, how it needs to look, what we need to look, what the standards are, and so during the day there's not really the chance to do that, just from a quiet standpoint to focus. Um, so that's what right now a lot of the after hours have been spent doing.
Yeah, writing writing standards and getting a handbook together is probably essential that I think a lot of departments have kind of like overlooked now. Like, so when you were doing AutoCAD and drafting back in the day, I remember getting a job and you got a big thick book slammed on your desk and you read through it because it had all those standards of what the line weights were, what the layers are, and how do you move from one place to the other, and how your sheets are set up if you have sheets that man, like it's a whole bunch of rules. And if you think about it now, a lot of Revit or any kind of 3D modeler users, they revert to a general rule, a BIMX plan, but there's no set standard or handbook for the internal guys modeling. And I think that's got to be probably the most important thing, especially for someone in charge of the department, making sure that everyone's on the same page. I remember writing the handbook, and honestly, I enjoyed it a lot. I love I like the organization side of it, and then making sure everyone's on the same page, but also including everyone on that decision, right? So you have the handbook. You say, "Hey guys, this is an open document right now, right? Let's kind of work through some workflows to see what works best." And oh, by the way, someone comes to you and say, like, "Yeah, this is not working anymore. We have this new project, and we got to change this up." And so it's constantly being developed, but it's good to have that as a reference on their desk because I can remember so many times where we get a new person coming in. I'd give them the handbook and I'd like sit down, read the handbook, and this is your copy, and if you ever have any questions on how to do something, there's 6 other people in the room that know how to do it. And also you have this index in front of you to kind of double check yourself. So I think that's great that you're making that handbook and standardization and keep it up because that's a big important thing that I think a lot of departments are missing nowadays.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I've found with the handbook is one, I've used videos. There's text and there's screenshots of like what things are to do and what to look like, but a lot of it was actually just I screen record most of it because I just found it's a lot easier to kind of walk through everything. So there's like a demo model essentially, and I kind of walk through from
Mm-hmm.
start to finish what everything looks like in the different stages. And then the best way to test the handbook I've found at certain points is to basically tell someone like, I need this end result. Use the handbook to get there. If you run into a roadblock, tell me, and that way I can go back and reinforce the handbook because there's going to be steps that I overlook because I kind of already know what to do and I know what to expect for. And so I won't say, you're supposed to double click, right click this to get this to pop, whatever the thing might be. You just kind of overlook it because you've done it so many times
Mm-hmm.
that to somebody else, they're not going to know that, oh, you're supposed to click here to go to there to open up this properties window to change this value or whatever the case might be.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you got to where you're at today with a lot of ambition and passion, and so that's something else that I'd like to reiterate is like if you're getting in this industry, James, your story proves it alone. If you find something that you find exciting and your ambition and passionate about it, and you keep with it, and you want to keep learning about it and striving to like be better at it, you're only going to be in positions that are you know requiring you to be a leader, right, or a manager of that kind. I think that's definitely what's happened to you from when you started out in high school, going through those classes, finding what you wanted, and then definitely taking that by both horns, right, and just going for it. I'm getting to where you're at today. The field experience you have is extremely important, especially to anyone who's hiring BIM people. If you're in the trades and you want to get into like digital construction, you just got to say that to anybody and they'll hire you. I mean, everyone is looking for a BIM modeler nowadays. I mean, I'm sure you guys are looking. If you have any mechanical department right now, they're always looking. So, if your knees are hurt, you're getting up there in age, and you don't want to get down and do the dirty stuff anymore, get behind a computer, model it for your peers. I think that's massive. So, James, we can touch on this if you want to or not, but earlier you said you had a God-given gift of Asperger's, and I'm wondering, how did you come up with that saying, and why do you think why is it a God-given gift for you?
I mean, it's a gift in some regards, it's a curse in others. I'll tell you that. Makes dating hard. Social relationships can be difficult. I'm not going to say that was easy or those are easy. I mean, leading people, that's been a difficult thing at times. But I think, for the job that I have, it's a gift because it's something that comes natural in the sense of like if you look kind of at the stereotypical things that people with that have, it's visualization of 3D things in their head and pattern recognition, which are like quintessential engineering traits and math. So that's kind of how I've tried to look at it is like, I just kind of was naturally made to do what I do now in some regards, but there's obviously things that I've go through a lot of practice to learn, like talking to guys in the field, working with other people. Like, I definitely would be better off if I was left alone in a room just to model, but that's not the role I have anymore. I'm not really I detail. I still run 3D models. I still attend coordination meetings. I still produce fab drawings, stuff like that, but it's not like I used to be where that was all I was doing. There's a lot more to it now that it's not, but that's kind of how I've tried to look at it.
That's amazing, and the reason I ask is I have a childhood friend who has Asperger's, and we grew up together. And I think your story is extremely inspiring. It kind of showing that, like, no matter what kind of any kind of issues you may have or struggle you're growing up, I hear from a lot of stories coming in where, like, yeah, people didn't graduate, people didn't have GEDs, they dropped out of college, and now they're running development departments for these construction companies because they had that ambition, they had that passion, they had that drive. So, James, I applaud you. That's awesome, and I'm glad you have that mindset. And the position you're at today is amazing. So just just know it's pretty awesome, and thank you for sharing that. So, James, I got one more question for you. So let's say people have questions about paneling and stuff like that. How can they reach you? How can they reach out to you? What's the best way to get in touch?
Probably LinkedIn. I mean, I check it pretty often. That was kind of how I built my career. So I know Alex, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but the way posts on LinkedIn started was so a lot of us who are younger kind of grew up watching, you know, quote unquote influencers. So I was born in '94. So we basically grew up with the
Mm-hmm.
internet. Like we went through, obviously I know for all the old people, there was internet before. Yeah, you can tell us all the time, but we had dial-up internet, we had instant messenger, we went through MySpace and all the different iterations. And so I never really had a audience on those type of like Instagram or Facebook stuff like that. But LinkedIn, the way it started was I watched a lot of construction tech, but I also saw a lot of it being like not practical. And so like I don't know, I don't want to call it jaded, but I have a certain um what's the word? Like I'm from the Midwest, so a lot of the things we do are very practical. Like it had to work. And so I
Yep.
wasn't in an innovation department. Everything I did was on a real job site. So like it kind of didn't have to be perfect. Like I couldn't like be pie in the sky of like it'd be great if like a drone could set this thing right here. Like I have a schedule to meet. Like we can't screw
Mm-hmm.
around. And so the way the LinkedIn started was I just started with a real job site. Like, hey, this is what happened today. Here's how I think we could have done it better if we used technology. That's initially how it started. Was exactly that, like 7 years ago at this point. But yeah, I would say LinkedIn's the best. That was a long answer to a very short question.
No, it's okay. I love it when people elaborate on that because they have different insights that not many people have. Like I only created LinkedIn because I got into construction. I didn't have any socials for a while. Got a LinkedIn about 5 years ago, and then I realized there's a big industry here. Started posting, having thoughts, putting them out there, getting a lot of feedback, and so that's kind of what jump started the whole thing of like, okay, maybe what I'm thinking is correct. Maybe what I'm saying is maybe not the most popular opinion, but there's something to be said about it. So no, that's awesome, and I'm happy you got out there and did that. I mean, you're still posting weekly job sites and panels and stuff you're doing, and that's awesome. Yeah, so everyone out there, follow James Hillegas on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about paneling, I'm sure James is the guru on all that, and he's more than happy to help out. James, thanks again for being on the podcast. I much appreciate it. And if listeners, if you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to follow, subscribe to Strive on all the socials, and stay tuned for more updates and more podcasts releasing. So thanks, James.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, buddy.